All right, let's dive into something pretty significant happening in Scottish education, a full-on review of its national curriculum. So you might be asking, why now? What's the story here? Let's get into it.
Now, here's the central question. Scotland's curriculum for excellence is, by many accounts, a success. So why on earth would you put it under the microscope for a major review? And that's a totally fair question. The answer really gets to the heart of this whole initiative.
So, a huge part of the why comes from this 2021 report by the OECD. They basically said, look, the foundation you've built is solid. It stood the test of time. But, and this is the key part, the world is not the same as it was when the curriculum was first designed. This isn't about fixing something that's broken, it's about evolution. It's about making sure a great curriculum stays great.
Okay, so what exactly needed this tune-up? Well, the OECD report didn't just speak in generalities. It got really specific about the friction points in the system.
They flagged four main things. First, there was some real ambiguity around what core knowledge students were supposed to be getting. Second, and this is a big one, teachers felt the curriculum was just cluttered. Too many things had been bolted on over the years. Third, there was a pretty jarring disconnect between primary, early secondary, and the senior years. And finally, there was no real system in place to review and update things regularly. It was clear a new strategy was needed.
And that new strategy couldn't just be handed down from on high. To really figure things out, Scotland's education leaders decided to try something different, something way more collaborative.
And I mean, they really went for it. They brought in over 450 people. We're talking teachers, school leaders, and other stakeholders. These are the people on the ground, working with this curriculum day in and day out. This wasn't just a small focus group. This was a massive, system-wide effort.
The whole process was built on this one powerful idea, co-design. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of experts creating a curriculum and just giving it to teachers, they worked with teachers to build the solutions together. This way, you make sure that the changes are actually practical and will work in a real classroom. It's common sense, but it's revolutionary. And this wasn't just a one-off project. They created a repeatable four-stage cycle for continuous improvement. You start with analysis, what's working, what isn't. Then you move to engagement and co-creation, where you test out new ideas. After that, you share what you've learned and create the support materials. And finally, you roll it out, monitor it, and the whole cycle starts over again. It's designed to be a living, breathing process.
So after all that, after bringing hundreds of people together and using this co-design model, what were the big takeaways? What did they actually learn? Well, it turns out the feedback was incredibly consistent across the board.
If there was one word that came up over and over and over again, it was this: declutter. The message from teachers was crystal clear. They felt like they were in a constant rush, trying to cover way too much content, which meant they couldn't go deep on anything. It's the classic mile-wide, inch-deep problem.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Decluttering didn't mean the same thing for every subject. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. For something like maths, for example, teachers actually wanted more prescription, a clearer roadmap to help with planning. But for the expressive arts, it was the exact opposite. Teachers there were adamant they needed the autonomy to tailor their lessons to their students and their community.
On top of decluttering, a few other big themes really stood out. Teachers wanted much more clarity on exactly what knowledge students need at those crucial transition points. They were tired of getting more and more guidance documents. They wanted things simplified and combined into one place. And they felt that important cross-curricular skills needed to be woven into the curriculum in a much more intentional way. So, as all this feedback started to pile up, the clutter, the lack of clarity, those disconnects between school stages, it started to point to a much deeper, more fundamental issue. The problem wasn't just individual pieces of content, it was the whole blueprint of the curriculum itself. And that blueprint has a name: the technical framework. The easiest way to think about it is like the curriculum's DNA. It's the underlying code, the rules, the guidelines, the benchmarks that teachers use to figure out what to teach and how to plan their lessons. It's the engine that makes the whole thing run. And it turned out that engine was causing a lot of the problems. The core parts of the framework were just too vague. This meant one school could interpret them completely differently from another, leading to real inconsistencies. So a student moving from primary to secondary might have a totally different knowledge base than their classmates. And that created the biggest problem of all: a huge gap between the general learning in early secondary school and the high-stakes exam years. You can sort of see it here on the student's journey. The curriculum is supposed to be this seamless path from age 3 all the way to 18. But what educators were describing was a massive pothole right here, a disconnect between the broad general education, or BGE, and the senior phase. Kids were getting to their most important exam years feeling unprepared, which is a recipe for stress and frustration.
So with a clear diagnosis of the problems and a pretty good idea of the root cause, the conversation naturally shifted to the future. What's the plan? What's the consensus on how to evolve this thing for the next generation of students?
Well, first off, the process itself was seen as a huge success. You can just feel the positivity in this quote from one of the participants. Teachers felt like their voices were finally being heard, that their expertise mattered, and that this wasn't just another pointless exercise. That buy-in is absolutely crucial for whatever happens next. In the consensus for the future, it really boils down to 4 key things. Number 1, evolve, don't replace. The core vision is still good. 2, declutter, big time, to make room for deeper learning. 3, clarify exactly what knowledge is essential. And 4, the big one, fix that underlying technical framework to finally bridge that gap between the different phases of school.
And so, that's the immediate next step, to take all this rich feedback, all this learning, and start the challenging but absolutely vital work of designing a new, evolved technical framework, basically writing the new DNA for Scotland's curriculum.
And all of this leaves us with the ultimate challenge, right? It's a question that every education system on the planet is wrestling with. How do you build a curriculum that gives teachers clear guidance, but also gives them the flexibility to be creative and inspiring? How do you build something that's truly made to last? It's a huge question and one we're thinking about. Thanks so much for joining me.